there's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory. They did not have an easily explainable pattern. And so, I think that people still take seriously trying to investigate and figure out what that is.
We're aware of the report requirement, and our team at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is, of course, actively working on that report. And we take reports of incursions into our airspace by any aircraft, identified or unidentified, very seriously and investigate each one. But ODNI would be working on that report, and in terms of disclosure, that would be up to them.
I guess in all seriousness, though, can you characterize the president's concerns about this phenomenon? I mean, it is this concept of objects in U.S. airspace that are either origined from other nations or other entities, but what is the concern of the president that this phenomenon seems to occur in the national security apparatus?
Well, I think broadly speaking, the fact that we have a team that's actively working on a report, certainly the safety of our personnel, security of our operations, our airspace are of paramount concern, whether that is identified or unidentified aircraft. And we don't discuss that publicly for a range of reasons, but certainly the president supports the ODNI putting together a report and following through on that commitment.
Of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating.
Yeah, we have 31 knots sustained wind, topside, gust of 40.
What was splashed? Splashed. Mark bearing and range.
Across the nation has made headlines out of it, and this afternoon we are honored indeed to have here in our studio this man, Kenneth Arnold, who we believe may be able to give us a first-hand account and give you the same on what happened. Kenneth, first of all, if you'll move up here to the microphone just a little closer, we'll ask you to just tell in your own fashion, as you told us last night in your hotel room and again this morning, what you were doing there and how this entire thing started. Go ahead, Kenneth.
Well, at about 2:15, I took off from Chehalis, Washington, en route to Yakima, and of course every time that any of us fly over the country near Mount Rainier, we spend an hour or two in search of the marine plane that's never been found that they believe is in the snow someplace southwest of that particular area. That area is located at about, its elevation is about 10,000 foot, and I had made one sweep in close to Mount Rainier and down one of the canyons and was dragging it for any types of objects that might prove to be the marine ship. And as I come out of the canyon there, it was about 15 minutes. I was approximately 25 to 28 miles from Mount Rainier. I climbed back up to 9,200 feet, and I noticed to the left of me a chain which looked to me like the tail of a Chinese kite, kind of weaving and going at a terrific speed across the face of Mount Rainier. I at first thought they were geese because it flew like geese, but it was going so fast that I immediately changed my mind and decided it was a bunch of new jet planes in formation. Well, as the planes come to the edge of Mount Rainier, flying at about 160 degrees south, I thought I would clock them because it was such a clear day, and I didn't know where their destination was, but due to the fact that I had Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams to clock them by, I just thought I'd see just how fast they were going, since among pilots we argue about speed so much. And they seemed to flip and flash in the sun just like a mirror. And in fact, I happened to be at an angle from the sun that seemed to hit the tops of these peculiar-looking things in such a way that it almost blinded you when you looked at them through your plexiglass windshield. Well, it was about 1 minute to 3 when I started clocking them on my sweep second-hand clock, and as I kept looking at them, I kept looking for their tails. They didn't have any tails. I thought, well, maybe something's wrong with my eyes, and I turns the plane around and opens the window and looks out the window, and sure enough, I couldn't find any tails on them. And the whole observation of these particular ships didn't last more than about 2.5 minutes, and I could see them only plainly when they seemed to tip their wing or whatever it was, and the sun flashed on them. They looked something like a pie plate that was cut in half with a sort of a convex triangle in the rear. Now, I thought, well, that maybe they're jet planes with just the tails painted green or brown or something, and didn't think too much of it, but kept on watching them. They didn't fly in a conventional formation that's taught in our Army. They seemed to kind of weave in and out right above the mountaintops. And I would say that they even went down into the canyons in several instances, probably 100 feet. But I could see them against the snow, of course, on Mount Rainier, and against the snow on Mount Adams as they were flashing, and against a high ridge that happens to lay in between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams. But when I observed the tail end of the last one passing Mount Adams, and I was at an angle near Mount Rainier from it, but I looked at my watch, and it showed 1 minute and 42 seconds. Well, I still thought, well, that's pretty fast, and I didn't stop to think what the distance was between the two mountains. Well, I landed at Yakima, Washington, and Al Baxter was there to greet me and saw up here. And he told me, I guess I better change my brand. But he kind of gave me a mysterious sort of a look that maybe I had seen something he didn't know. And, well, I just kind of forgot it then till I got down at Pendleton, and I began looking at my map and taking measurements on it. And the best calculation I could figure out, now even in spite of error, would be around 1,200 miles an hour, because making the distance from Mount Rainier to Mount Adams in, we'll say, approximately 2 minutes, it's almost, it'd be around 25 miles per minute. Now, allowing for error, we can give them 3 minutes or 4 minutes to make it, and they're still going more than 800 miles an hour, and to my knowledge, there isn't anything that I read about outside of some of the German rockets that would go that fast.
Well, folks, I've got some good news tonight for you. You don't have to worry any more about those flying discs. I found out it was just Bing Crosby throwing away a lot of Sinatra records. Anyway, I can't understand why people scare so easily.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. Late this afternoon, a bulletin from New Mexico suggested that the widely publicized mystery of the flying saucers may soon be solved. Army Air Force officers reported that one of the strange discs had been found and inspected sometime last week.
Captain Mantell, Flight Leader F-51 to Godman Tower. Over.
Stand by for further instructions. Vector the flight into the area of the unknown. Vector Mantell on a heading of 210 degrees. Godman Tower to Captain Mantell. Come in, over.
Mantell to Godman Tower. Over.
Godman Tower to Captain Mantell. Investigate an unidentified object in your area.
Mantell to Tower. I see it. Above and ahead of me. I'm still climbing.
A few moments later, one of Mantell's wingmen was heard.
What the hell are we looking for?
After a moment, Captain Mantell made a reply.
Mantell to Tower. The object is directly ahead of and above me. Now moving at half my speed.
Godman Tower to leader, Flight 451. Godman Tower to leader, Flight 451. Come in.
Mantell to Tower. It appears to be a metallic object of tremendous size.
The object now was in visual view of the tower personnel.
Mantell to Tower. I'm trying to close in for a better look. I'll go to 20,000 feet.
Shortly after this, Pilot Hammond, the remaining wingman with Mantell, called Mantell over his radio.
Level off, Captain, until I've regained visual contact.
The personnel in Godman Tower waited tensely for Mantell's reply, but he made no answer. A moment later, Pilot Hammond made another report to the tower. Mantell seemed to have disappeared. Mantell had apparently climbed beyond his wingman. At 15:25, the remaining wingman broke off and returned to Stanford Field. The object, which was in visual sight from the tower, as were the F-51s during the chase, disappeared at approximately 15:50. The F-51s were first lost to view, and then the object went behind a cloud.
Godwin Tower to Captain Mantell. Come in. Over. This is Godwin Tower to Captain Mantell. Come in. Over.
At 17:50, Stanford advised Godman Tower that Mantell had crashed 5 miles southwest of Franklin, Kentucky.
The new code name for the UFO investigative project was Blue Book. The general appointed Captain Edward J. Ruppelt of ATIC at Wright-Patterson as officer in charge of Project Blue Book. Ruppelt's department was designated as Air Phenomenon Branch, Air Technical Intelligence. At Ruppelt's disposal was a large staff of distinguished scientists, both military and civilian.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. Our basic difficulty in dealing with these is that there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States.
Major Keyhole, as author of the book Flying Saucers Are Real, what is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin. During a 3-year investigation, I found that many pilots have described objects of substance and high speed. One case, pilots reported their plane was buffeted by an object which passed them at 500 miles an hour. Obviously, this was a solid object, and I believe it was from outer space.
It's not a brief story, but it goes back to 1953 when a CIA-involved investigation was held. As a result of the extremely heavy wave of sightings in 1952, the CIA and Air Force became so concerned over the sheer number of reports that were tying up American intelligence channels that they wanted to get this signal out of the system, asked the Air Force, the CIA asked the Air Force for a debunking policy. The literal wording was to debunk the flying saucers, to decrease public interest in the UFOs. Regulations were promulgated very shortly that made it a crime punishable with, I think it's $10,000 fine and or 10 years in prison to release any information at airbase level on UFOs. And as a result of that, and a sequence of steady downgrading, the whole problem has been essentially lost from scientific sight in the U.S., and nothing resembling any scientific investigation has been going on in the past 15 years.
The panel members were seated around this table. It was a rather somber and impressive occasion, actually. I was a junior member, and I remember feeling considerably nervous and apprehensive about being in front of this powerhouse of scientists. But then for the past 4 years, I had been scientific advisor to the U.S. Air Force on this very problem. There were 2 films that were of particular interest to the panel at that time. One was a film taken by a Navy officer while on vacation in Utah, near Tremonton, Utah, and the other was a film taken in Great Falls, Montana, by the owner of the local baseball team. The Utah film had already been subjected to some 1,000 or so man-hours of analysis by the Navy's Photographic Interpretation Laboratory. So the panel got up from their chairs and crouched around the wall to examine the films, and they asked to have the films run several times, as a matter of fact. Now, the Navy had, on the basis of their detailed analysis of the Utah films, they had concluded that the objects shown on the films could not be birds, balloons, aircraft, and so forth, but indeed that they were self-luminous, unidentified objects. Despite this conclusion, the panel rejected it and concluded that the objects were birds. They couldn't be unidentified, therefore they had to be birds. I came away from the meeting and from the room with the distinct feeling, however, that the panel had deliberately moved to debunk the whole subject and not to give it the serious scientific attention which it deserved.
The astronomers have long been the leading theorists on the possibility of life in outer space. Astronomer Carl Sagan is consultant to a current Air Force scientific panel. Astronomer Thornton Page was on a CIA committee that investigated UFO reports in 1952. Its conclusion? No evidence of UFOs.
Our panel was expected to be, and I think was, objective in its approach, and tried to evaluate all the reports without saying they're ridiculous in advance. That has been repeated quite recently, and that is a good reason for talking with Carl Sagan here, because he's in the same position that I was, being the only astronomer in a similar panel.
There's not a single verified or checked out report which is at all connectable with the possibility of extraterrestrial life. It doesn't say that I think extraterrestrial life is impossible. Quite the contrary. I think that Many of the stars in the sky have planetary systems. We know enough now about the origin of life to make it appear likely that life arises naturally on the vast bulk of these planets. It's possible, but by no means certain, that life on many of these planets evolves into beings which are as advanced as we, or more advanced. And I don't see any reason why we can't imagine that there are civilizations thousands or millions of years in advance of ourselves, capable of technical feats that we can hardly imagine. If you would believe, as the flying saucer cultists would have us believe, that the majority of the saucer reports are due to visitations, then you have a very strange situation. That means several spaceships are coming to the Earth over interstellar distances every day, as if all the anthropologists in the world were to converge on one of the Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean because they just invented the fishnet there or something.
This is the Montana film, projected exactly as it was photographed. The objects are moving against a 25 to 28 mile an hour wind. This is the film in double frame or slow motion. A slight bounce in the movement of the objects as well as the tower is perceptible. This is due to the handheld camera. The film, analyzed frame by frame, shows the movement of the objects to be horizontal and steady.
We will now vary the action and size of the objects and also stop the action from time to time for your study. We have just made a jump cut in the film to an enlarged size and reversed the action. You are now seeing the objects exactly as they were photographed, but from a closer perspective. Analysis reveals that the objects are not balloons, nor any kind of known aircraft. The images are very different from those produced by any kind of birds at any distance. The shape, brightness, speed, rectilinear path, steady motion, and separation rule out various forms of optical atmospheric mirages or cloud reflections. Comprehensive analysis has eliminated meteors and other known natural phenomena. The possibility of airplane reflection has been carefully studied and ruled out.
This is the Utah film as it was originally photographed.
The image structure and maneuvers definitely eliminate any kind of known aircraft.
This is where Chief Photographer Newhouse, in his excitement, changed exposure. He believed that by changing density and giving the film more contrast, he could clarify the objects. The single object that reversed its course. The bounce is due to handheld camera. Now we study the action of one section of the film. We stop the action. We move in.
Within a 5-mile range, aircraft could be determined. In excess of 5 miles, the speeds are greater than aircraft can achieve, except in straight-line speed runs. The movement here follows an elliptical or circular pattern. Microscopic examination reveals that the objects are well focused. Their size varies from 1/6 to 1/10 the size of the moon, as it appears to the naked eye. Their form is circular and sometimes elliptical. This fits the commonly used flying saucer description.
Observe the object in the upper left corner. We move in to study the action. The object upper left will go out of frame on widescreen projection. Observe the motion of the two objects upper right as we rock them back and forth. Now we move over and up on the frame to make a closer study of the object in the upper left corner.
Examine this object closely. Compare it with those objects you saw in the Montana film. These films were taken approximately 2 years apart, hundreds of miles apart.
We drop back to the original perspective and resume. Now the section of the film where photographer Newhouse changed exposure.
Weather conditions, together with the persistence and motion of the formations, eliminate the possibility of atmospheric mirages. Photogrammetric experiments have shown that the images cannot be associated with any kind of birds at any distance.
Stop. Now forward again. Stop. We drop back to original perspective. Now once again, and for the last time, the Utah film.
The objects cannot be associated with any known balloon observations.
For the last time, the Montana film.
Now, explain what are we seeing and why are we seeing it in this this particular
okay,
shade?
so we'll just kind of go around. So if you look at the OPRs operate in the top left corner. NAR is narrow field of view, which is zoomed in. IR at the top middle, it means it's in infrared mode. So instead of seeing color, you're seeing temperature variations. Okay. And these things are extremely sensitive to in like tenths of degrees. They will tell you the difference to color. So it'll go from black to white. So in this case, white is hot. So if you look down in the bottom left corner, it says WHT. That's white. That means white is hot. So the object that you're looking at is hotter than the sky around it. But what you also notice is there's no plumes. Now, if you're looking at an airplane, when you get closer, you'll actually see the exhaust coming out, and there will be a really glowing plume. That's important as we look at the video. And then most of the stuff on here you really don't need to know. What you can look at is the bottom right corner. It says 19,990 and a B. That's the altitude. And if you look up in the little words where it says HDG and then BALT, it's autopilot. So it's on altitude hold. It's just flying for that. So you can go ahead and play the video. And so those two bars next to the white object, that's a passive track. So what he's done is he's commanded the FLIR to track that. So what the system does is it uses, it's actually tracking, it can track pixels, and it's just basically block those hot pixels, those white pixels from the black ones. And then you're going to see now, pause it real quick. So up at the top, see it went to a white screen with the black object. This is a black and white TV mode. And if you look at the top, it says TV. So narrow in TV mode is actually, you can get closer than narrow in IR. It's literally narrow in IR is about medium in TV mode. So you can get closer with the TV mode. So as you look at it now, in this case, you would actually start to see stuff going on. And even in TV mode, because you get exhaust, the black exhaust that comes out, you'll usually be able to see kind of some of that coming out of the back end. You don't see anything. This thing's just sitting there. And if you look at the top where it says 3 right, that's the pod is looking 3 degrees right of the nose of the airplane, right? So he's just flying along. The bottom numbers, don't worry, those are time. So it's 41:56. So go ahead and hit play. And what he's doing is Chad's going through all the different modes because he's like, oh, I got it. And he's going to try and see the best video that he can get. Now, there's rumors that this video is like 10 minutes long. No, what you're looking at is the entire video. Now, notice where it says 99.9.
Mm-hmm.
So hit pause real quick. What that means is while he's got the targeting pod, because that's his primary sensor right now, the radar is still trying to look at this object and trying to range it, and the radar can't get ranging on it. So the object is doing something to say, I'm not giving you back, because it's just a Doppler radar, just like a police radar is a Doppler. It's trying to get a ranging on you, and it can't do it. So when it says 99.9, the radar cannot see this object right now. It's not allowing it to get range. Because everyone thinks stealth is invisible. It's not. It's a technology to basically make it harder for radars to see you. You know, and that's the whole thing. You know, if you look at airplanes that are nose on are harder to see than airplanes at the sides. Kind of like, think of a barn door. If you're looking at the whole barn door, it's really easy to see. If I turn the barn door sideways where it's really thin, it's going to be a lot harder for you to see it.
Got it.
So that's the easiest, most basic way to look at this. So keep going. You can play again. And you can look, the airplane is still sitting at 20,000 feet. It's doing 250 knots. He's going to go through different modes and try and lock it. And it's just kind of sitting, and all of a sudden, as the video goes on, I think it's a minute and a half long. See, it's going to try and reacquire. It recenters the pod. So it's slowly drifting to the left. The Hornet is still going the same heading. It's just kind of hanging out, and they're just filming this thing. And then when they get close, it's going to zing off the left-hand side. When you see it on a full, because this, you think digital, you'd be able to get a one-for-one copy. Unlike, when you copy your album to a cassette, you lose a little quality. Well, you still do in digital world, and off it goes to the left. And that's pretty fast to leave that field of view. When we have big monitors that we look at these when they come back, so we're looking at the original tapes. So
play the end of that again, please, Jamie. So when it's taking off, how fast, when it just sort of like leaves the field of view and takes off to the left, how fast is that going?
I would say pretty fast. It's an estimate. If we had ranging, you could obviously do the triangle and go, hey, because we know how big the field of view is. But for something to leave the field of view that fast with the pod just staring is pretty fast. I mean, it's like out of here.
Like nothing that we have?
No, because we can't. I don't care what airplane it is. So let's just use the F-22 Raptor. That's probably it's probably the best airplane in the world right now, performance-wise. It can't take off like that.